So you were mentioning you were a little bit excited about what was going on.
Into it.
Yeah. I mean, might as well. You were talking about Street Fighter V, and Rose just recently came out as of this recording, and a couple days ago or something like that. I've been seeing a lot of gameplay for her, watching Sako, Momochi. Well, Momochi's been playing Ryu, but I've seen some of his Rose play, and it's pretty cool. I like the rework a lot more than my initial impression. But you were talking about some lore stuff, like some lore shit that was going on.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into the gameplay if we wanted to, but really, like, what caught me off guard was the fact that Street Fighter V, up until this point, all the story has been kind of crap, right? Like,
you mean like all of these Street Fighters leading up to this moment?
No, I mean just like particularly Street Fighter.
Okay, yeah,
5.
Yeah, 5.
Street Fighter
I was
5.
gonna say 5's story is overtly bad. Like it's
like it feels like a necessary inclusion where they're like, man, we really got to wrap up the Bison story so that it makes sense for 3 or whatever. Like whatever their plans are, it feels like a very forced
it feels like an editorial
like intermediate
mandate.
One.
Yeah.
Like here's the thing. It's not like Street Fighter's lore is a lot more interesting than Street Fighter's told story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
The pieces are a lot more interesting than anything you get from the arcade endings. And
I think
stuff like that
in general, I agree with what that statement is, but I'll qualify that I think that no one has really explored them in an interesting fashion, with the exception, I'll say, of the Assassin's Fist live action show / movie, depending on how you digest that media. I know that you can watch it straight through. That Assassin's Fist stuff is the first season, I guess I would say. They made a second one for pre Street Fighter V, and I never got to see it, and I hear it's a total mess. They also rebuke it. They're like Verizon or whatever their sponsor really got in the way of not only the distribution but the production and blah 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 blah. But yeah, most elements of the Street Fighter story are pretty less than savory when you kind of really put a microscope to them.
And I mean more so in the sense of what story the games tell you. Like people love that. People ironically love the live action Street Fighter movie, and then then a lot of people genuinely enjoy the animated second movie. Or not? It's not a second movie. It's just Street Fighter 2, the movie, animated or whatever.
Yeah. Because of those Chun-Li
and
titties.
Of course, sure, because of the Chun-Li.
That's one of my first boners.
Oh my god. I don't want to talk about your boners today.
Not today.
I really don't want to talk about your boners today because unrelated to any of that at all. The gameplay story is just it's always been there tangentially just to key interests here and there, but never really tell an overarching plot.
Yeah.
But in recent it was over a decade ago at this point, when NetherRealm kind of stepped up their game and were like, here is our fighting game story for MK9. We're going to have a reboot and it's going to be a legit story from A to B. And to be fair, that plot isn't novel storytelling. It's not it's not War and Peace or anything like that. But it's at least a cinematic story.
It's all in the execution, yeah. The writing, as you mentioned, is not exactly breaking any trends. It's a very cookie cutter story, so to speak, for the NetherRealm Warner Brothers, or for the Mortal Kombat games, and then for Injustice, it's very comic book fair, based off of certain comic books as well with the Injustice storyline. But in the execution, yeah, it's truly it's acted out. They put some time into the presentation of it. In how you interact with the story, kind of very timely combat scenarios, that kind of work like a very fun, more fleshed out arcade mode. But yeah, no, it's something that I think that the West, and specifically NetherRealm, has championed. Meanwhile, the story and the ideas for Japanese fighting games like Street Fighter, like King of Fighters, like Tekken are pretty interesting. I think Tekken does the best in the East right now. I think Tekken's story.
Okay,
so
the two comparisons are the two modern comparisons are Tekken 7 story mode, which I think is kind of bad.
It's not great. I'm not saying it's a high bar, but
it has some really high points.
Yeah.
Like the Jin versus Heihachi fight. But other than that, and like the Akuma fights. Other than those, that story mode is really bad.
Yeah, no, I'm not championing it. I'm not like saying it's a high bar, but I'm saying that across the board, as far as Japanese fighting games are concerned, or just Eastern fighting games are concerned, I'm like, I don't really think of too many with like really engaging story
No.
at all. Like, I can't
Blaze Blue just makes it a, and so does whatchamacallit, Guilty Gear as well. They do a visual novel, basically,
and
for
that's
their stories.
If you're into that, it's good, but it's a lot of voice acting.
Lot of voice acting.
Yep. It
and like
chunky.
I fell asleep. I fell asleep going through the Guilty Gear Revelator story.
And that's the thing. Like, if you want the content, it's all there. It's not succinct by any means. It is detailed, but it is a lot of chunky information. Even just watching and doing through excerpt, like just basic, like the first Guilty Gear of this last generation, and it's like it's a lot of information before even leading into Rev or Rev 2. So. Those are a very different type of presentation and execution on a story mode, but
and like what I would like to see going forward is like NetherRealm puts themselves in an awkward situation where every character has to be important to the story, more or less.
They have a role, so to speak. I don't know if they're all necessarily important, quote unquote.
Well, they need to have a role of some sort, yeah.
Yeah, they have like a function for a very brief period of time, because some of the characters are very fleeting in those stories,
true,
like in Injustice or Mortal Kombat. Like, they're like, you can't really tell me, like, do you remember God, I can't even remember fucking Mortal Kombat characters' names.
The Collector, I know that character was pretty fleeting, but
like
everybody else seems to have like a purpose, and they seem to have like some weight in the story, whereas like it's really hard to fit El Fuerte in Street Fighter 4's story. You know what I mean? Like, he has a story during the events of Street Fighter 4, but it's not part of the overarching plot.
Yeah, but I mean, it makes sense.
And I'm okay with that. But
yeah.
it's hard to, when you're making a big story mode like Street Fighter 5 did, and you have such a big cast, it's hard to tell both a overarching dramatic story while not skimping on some of the characters.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically
like the problem with Street Fighter 5 story mode is like it spends a bizarre amount of time on certain characters that shouldn't matter at all. Like there is time spent in that mode about the budding friendship between Ibuki and Mika, and it's like, why? This is the story about Charlie Nash rising from the dead and Rashid getting revenge against Bison, while Ryu comes in and says, "I'm here too," I guess. Like, it's such a mess of a story.
I mean, it's long. It has to focus on so many characters. It kind of has like these fighting. You're forcing them to do like Avengers Endgame like every single time.
Right, exactly. But that's the problem, is that like nobody gets a focus, and like at least for Avengers, like, they have a cinematic universe that allows them to construct these different characters and, have them overlap over time. Whereas, fighting games, they get, at best, they get a 4-hour cinematic story mode. And what I think I would prefer is more like, if you're going to do cinematic story mode, focus intently on what's important, and like maybe have a few other side things for the other casts. But I guess that's what Tekken did as well. I just don't like the Tekken 7 story. I think the presentation was terrible.
I mean, we can critique it on all the live long day, but like at the end of the day, and because it is a part of the product, but like I'm really basically like hyper analyzing the frosting on the cake at this point. Like, I'm not here for that. And in general, that's kind of like, if you remember Street Fighter 5's launch, like it was very tacked on. It wasn't cinematic. It was like very just like, it was criticized for being a bare bones product. Like, this is good for the people who like a fighting game, but I guess for the people who are like casuals and want an enjoyable story and sort of a more, laissez-faire experience, they felt shortchanged on the launch of 5. 5 has obviously since grown and has become a much more fulfilling product that you can buy now at a reasonable price. But that was its impression, when it hit the market, and I feel like it's sort of stuck with that. It's put in sort of its impression for a while for Street Fighter to be
for anybody that didn't hold out, or anybody that didn't want to give it a second chance. It's like Street Fighter 5 is just that shitty Street Fighter game that came out and stole everybody's money.
Yeah, I don't know about shitty, but I mean, like, it just didn't serve a certain, a certain / large demographic of people.
It wasn't the sequel to Street Fighter 4 in a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, before had, in my opinion, coming off of 4, it was going to be hard pressed. I was already imagining this back, when 5 was announced and coming out, and like, what, it was like 6 years ago now. Jesus, It was like, I was like, there's no way. It's going to be really hard for 5 to really top the legacy of 4. 4 is a giant in the fighting. It's probably has the most impact on fighting games, as like a global impact than any fighting game will ever have. That I can think of, honestly. And we talk about this in the underrated, overrated video that I'm going to publish hopefully later this week. Actually, no, we already did. Sorry. That's the one that's already out on the YouTube.
Gotcha.
But yeah, still, it's, Street Fighter 4 is a giant, and 5 coming in. 5 does amazing things, and I still think 5 is a fantastic game in its totality now. I just think that I can understand if some people were left a little miffed at launch, but we're kind of getting off topic. I'm still waiting for you to tell me about the stuff from Street Fighter 5's story.
Right. So to bring it all back, the reason why I even brought up Mortal Kombat was because when NetherRealm decided they wanted to have a more concise cinematic story, they rebooted the series by using time travel. In Rose's particular character story in Street Fighter 5, she learns after fighting G. She has a prophecy appear in her mind that G is aware of and Gil is aware of, that a meteor is going to hit the Earth and cause an apocalypse. And apparently there's no way to stop this. G has his plans for this, Gil has his plans for this, but either way, one of those scenarios is going to end with the apocalypse of the Earth, essentially. And so her solution to this is that she tells herself, I need my younger self to fix this in the past, which alludes to the idea that the next Street Fighter is going to be a reboot, assumingly starting in either the Street Fighter 1 era or the Alpha series.
Yeah, because I'm like, they're behind story-wise. Everything is behind Third Strike.
Yes.
So, and 4 is like, I guess somewhere in between. I think
the chronology is 1 Alpha, 2, 4, 5, 3.
Yeah. And so, as I was saying, 4 is somewhere between Alpha and Third Strike. So 5 is still before Third Strike, but after 4, then 5 is like the closest we've gotten so far.
Yeah, because 5 ends just before Third Strike begins.
Yeah, so it's like, if this...
Or Second Impact, I guess, because Third Strike is the sequel to the Second Impact.
It's like... so the storyline...
It's a little confusing.
I mean, honestly, they're all confusing, so to speak. But it's an interesting concept. I mean, if it's going to be like a Mortal Kombat 9 situation where like they reboot the whole thing, like with like Kung Lao and Raiden going back and like dealing with the newer versions, I doubt they'd go so far as to like have them interacting, so to speak, with like their future and past selves.
Yeah, I doubt that. I think what it is it's going to be really close to Mortal Kombat 9, where Rose sends clues to past Rose about things to happen in the future, and she tries to work around that, but the story still revolves around Ryu and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like, more or less what a reboot like that does is it lets you retell the story in a way that newer audiences can just hop right in, and older audiences can see the differences and go, oh wow, this, that, and the other. And it was just really weird to see that suddenly appear in a character story for Rose, because, like, for those who don't know, this current season of Street Fighter V apparently wasn't supposed to happen. There were some issues going on with the production of the sequel to Street Fighter V, and in fact, the creative, I don't know if he was creative director or just the director of the overarching IP, but Ono Yoshinori Ono, I believe his name is,
Yeah.
was more or less fired because Capcom was really unhappy with the way that the sequel for Street Fighter V was turning out.
Wait, Yoshinori was... I know that he had left the company.
Well, he left very abruptly.
Yeah, but I thought that he was... I thought that he left a long time ago. This is like... Are we still talking about things in the past?
Yeah, we're talking about things in the past.
Okay, because because I remember him... That announcement being a while ago.
He left a while ago, but... maybe a couple months after he left, that's when they brought up the fact that, we're going to have an unexpected 5th season of Street Fighter V. And it's largely rumored that the only reason why this season even came out was because they needed more time to finish Street Fighter 6. So they wanted to give more, they wanted 5's lifespan to extend past the expected 2020 date.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we get this kind of revelation in a character that wasn't even supposed to come out until, recently, it's just weird. It's very strange and it's very unexpected.
Yeah. I know that as an aside, Ono had mentioned that he went to, like, in a recent tweet, like not even like 3 days ago, some shit, that he went to Capcom for the first time after kind of like putting his notice, so to speak, because he's not actually done yet. He's actually leaving Capcom this summer, so to speak. Right. But he's going to, I think he's going to work for Riot.
I think he's going to be a consultant.
Yeah. But he went to go talk with his, Capcom former employees about, just the legality of him moving in the industry and stuff like that. But I know he has something lined up. It'd be really interesting to see him on the Riot fighting game.
That'll be interesting. Like, there's been so much, like, I don't want to say so much has come out because it seems like everybody kind of
like nothing's come out for that game.
No, not about the Riot game, but like, because like some people love Ono and some people fucking hate him. Like when he announced that he was stepping down, like, a lot of people were understandably upset. Like he's more or less has been the face of Street Fighter since 4.
Yeah.
But like a lot of people have come out and been like, listen, not it's one of these things that's like you have to wonder who to believe and who to trust on your sources.
Yeah.
But like people have come out and been like, listen, like he took a lot of the credit for what the development team did. Like he is not Street Fighter 4.
Yeah, he's not the he's not even the game director. He's just, he's a producer and he's also he's a project manager. So,
right.
He's the face of it. Now, granted, those developers, if they want credit, I mean, credit's due. We understand, like, what you guys had done from a design aspect for certain. But, someone has to be the representative for your guys' efforts.
Right.
And, has to be the company man for these things,
Right.
In general,
but that makes me go, like, so is that what they want him for in Riot? What do they want from him?
I mean, I definitely think that he has an understanding, definitely, as a project manager and as a producer for fighting games for, like, God knows how long, for Capcom for God knows how long. He definitely understands, he has enough knowledge to have, input that won't be questioned. And also, he should be able, he's not going to be the one, champion, being at the spear, the tip of the spear as far as the development process is going to be, but he's going to be able to kind of coordinate and be a leader and kind of guide them. And so, like you said, he could be an advisor or he could be literally signed onto the staff as, an actual producer for that game. Who knows? We don't know the extent of that, but I think that either way, he obviously offers a bevy of experience in the arena.
True, yeah. I it's just one of those things that surprised me because, like, as much as he oversaw 4, he oversaw 5 as well, and that was just a rushed. It was almost a failure. Like, they really had to work hard to get that thing back on tracks.
Yeah, no, 5 was just a project since its release in like 2015-16 of just continually improving the impression of the game. And it's a rough way to do things, but I mean, it's a way to do things and it's fine. Like 4 had much more positivity from the outset, but that was like that was a different time, we existed in an era where we didn't expect another fighting game, another Street Fighter at that point, because it had been almost a decade since we'd seen anything. So we're like, it's probably just not going to happen. at that point, and like fighting games had reached a sort of stagnant pool, so to speak. Like the early 2000s weren't especially kind. Obviously there's some games that came out in that era, like, you know, Guilty Gear, X and Core, I think, and a couple other things, but it was kind of dry for like a lot of the main contributors, the main games, Tekken, etc. So it wasn't until 4 came out that like it really kind of drew the general masses back into the, you know, fighting game community.
Okay, that's fair.
But yeah.
But to bring it all back, with the possibility of the next Street Fighter being a remake or a redo of the Alpha series, does that spark your interest anymore? Because I know you kind of dropped off of 5 pretty quickly, and you're much more into Tekken as it is right now.
Yeah, and I've been playing Tekken much more seriously for like the last 2 to 3 to 4 years now. As far as Street Fighter is concerned, yeah, I didn't stick with it too deeply. I was like pretty fun and into it at launch, and I kind of stuck through like some of the first 2 seasons, I want to say, but beyond that, I kind of just dropped it. But as far as it being focused on Alpha, potentially Street Fighter 6, that sounds like fun. I played a lot of Alpha as a kid, so there's definitely a small nostalgia factor at play. But with regards to like what they're gonna do with the story, I just hope that it's as, you know, I hope it's something robust. I hope it's something very, how should I say, interesting and sort of daring to kind of challenge the paradigm that they've already got going. I know it's gonna be not gonna be too crazy. They still have to kind of make sure that like once the dust settles, you know, everyone still has a place. Of, you know, iconography. Like Chun-Li still has to be around, you know, Ryu still has to be Ryu, you know, Ken still has to be, you know, the rival, etc. And Bison Sagat or some sort of miscellaneous villain will be in the background as well. But beyond that, you have a lot of opportunity here to shift the design and sort of the perspective of a lot of the ancillary characters, so to speak. So I feel like they should go buck wild with them. It could be fun not only from those characters, like from a design standpoint, what you can do with them, like what they did with Nash in general is, I think, pretty cool comparatively to where he existed. I think they had a good character evolution from a design and from a character aesthetically designed standpoint, and from a mechanical design standpoint. What they did with Nash, I think, was both.
You might be the only person to think that.
I know, yeah, and I probably am. I don't give a fuck.
People fucking hate that Nash redesign.
Oh, they can suck my dick. I mean, in general, at the end of the day, I think that I think they successfully evolved the character in an interesting way to me. Is it fun to deal with? True. No. Is it? I feel like everything coincides. Like the mechanical elements of that character stay true to what he is like now as a character, you know, in the story. So, right. But you know,
that's what I mean. They hate the story redesign. They hate the aesthetic of it.
Oh, I think there's. I mean, as far as like bringing people back from the dead, like you're gonna have to sort of work with what you got. Plus, the game has like damn near as many costumes as DOA, so it's like you guys really have no room to complain. If you don't like looking at zombie arms, then just go ahead. And switch them.
I know. It's just every time Nash gets brought up outside of the ancillary of people that like there are people like you talk to people that have been playing Street Fighter 5 forever, and it's like whatever that is. It is the way it is. Like you just live with it.
Yeah.
But like any time it gets mentioned to somebody who doesn't play it a lot or doesn't discuss it a lot, it gets got up every time, and I'm just like, oh my
that's
God.
Weird.
Like
I don't know, I didn't know that was such a sticking point.
I don't know, that's just something I keep hearing from people. I'm like, oh my God. But that's the thing, right? Like it feels like when you, because there's different levels of like attentiveness to the characters' designs and whatnot, or like care, I should say, in that like if you're part of the FGC and the competitive aspect, nobody really cares as long as the character does what they want to do, you know, and as long as they function in a way that's like close to what they find is competitively viable. But like there are some of the diehards that are on the more casual sides of things that's like anytime something changes, they just like do not take to it, and I have to wonder, like that kind of makes me worry about a reboot, if anything. That like Capcom might play it too safe, and like we're just gonna see Ryu as he is again, Ken as he was again, Chun in the old Alpha costume again, and it's like I don't know. Like as excited as I was when I mentioned to you about that like revelation that happens in Rose's story, like reboots are a tricky thing, and it's like I worry that it's going to be too much of the same.
In general, I mean, that's the tightrope that you walk, appealing to the long-standing iconography of a character, meanwhile trying to change them. Like, this is the tightrope that any long-standing series has to deal with. Like comic books in general, like American comic books, like how long and how many different ways can you evolve a character before just eventually replacing them with another character, which would be the natural assumption because time passes. It's like eventually, you give the mantle of Spider-Man to Miles, or you just keep reinventing Peter. Like, you only have so many options as the character ages, as the story progresses in real time. Our relationship to the story changes, and so like with Street Fighter, that's why I think that it's better that these things evolve naturally. And what I mean to say is, like, they should coincide with real time. Like, we can move on from Ryu. Like, we can have a different protagonist, which is like,
I wish we could.
In realistic terms, yeah, it's unlikely, because when I say in realistic terms, Ryu is just way too marketable. Like, it is just too integral to the sales of the game. Same thing with Chun-Li. Same thing. Like, if Guile, like if there wasn't a fireball retard like in the game, damn it, there's always one. All right, so in a game, but you have to stick to these paradigms. You have to always have one, or rather have these, memorable characters, so to speak.
Yeah,
archetypes.
like it really is that way, because like they tried it with New Generation, and people fucking hated it.
Exactly, like
they grew to love the characters, and now people won't shut the hell up about some of them. But like, oh my god, so many people were upset that it wasn't 12. Like, for the unaware, there's a character in Third Strike called 12, who's like a big goop monster.
Yeah, he's basically 11.
Yeah, well, no, so in Third Strike, he's a legitimate character who could copy other characters, but like he had his own moveset and everything.
Yeah.
And then in Street Fighter V, when when new characters were being announced, Capcom announced like, oh, we're gonna release a character called 11 that just copies what other people do. And people were so upset, and I was like, who the fuck cares about 12?
So that was
I thought nobody cared about this character.
That was a whole saga, because they're talking about new characters. They like a screen leak thing comes out of like the 11 model, and like in the menu, and everyone's like, what the fuck? Like, 11? This is not like we wanted Viper, we wanted all these other characters. Like, what the fuck? Yeah. And then all of a sudden, the real news comes out that 11 is just a Mokujin. It's just a copy character. Like, it doesn't actually. It's a Soul Master, or whatever the hell he is called in Soul Calibur. Like,
he's not taking the place of the 5th character that has yet to be revealed.
Yeah. He has no agency. He's just a random option, essentially, like with a palette swap, and everyone just turned and was like, man, what the hell? I missed 12.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like,
it's like,
you can't please these people,
oh my
man.
God, you're all such bitches.
There's no winning. There's no winning. And this is what game developers deal with, like at the highest level. Like when you're dealing with a series like this that has like so much legacy, and like fans that are just like this, that are extremely anal, that just want what they want. They want what they want. So it's hard to play catch all. Really, I mean, you never really can. You can only just hope for a net positive.
Mm-hmm. That's true. There's some people trying to main 11, quote unquote.
Yeah, okay. And I'm trying to main. Yeah, all right. Just fucking press the random button.
I know,
fucking idiots. Look, if you wanted to play every character in the game, that's fine. Just say that you want to play every character in the game. Don't be like, I'm an 11 main. Like, what?
No,
what
and
are you
to the degree in which they have like mods on the PC version, so that 11's doesn't change shape. He just copies the moveset. And get this, and they've also changed, they've also modded Nadeshko, the assistant to Armika, to also be 11.
Yeah, those people, they like sexually identify as amoebas. Like, they're just weird, right? Like, they're just psychopaths. Like, I don't care about these people. Like, they're just like I have to have like.
I feel like it has to be it has to be an identity thing. It has to be. That's all it is. I need to be the guy who's the 11 main. That's who I am.
Yeah. Like, it's definitely like.
And I feel like if we put two of them in a room, like they didn't know they were going to be in the same room, right? And then we said, hey, by the way, one of them would kill the other. Because only one can remain.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, there can only be one, contrarian for Street Fighter player in the room. Like, otherwise, I'm not special anymore.
Yeah.
You lessen my worth.
You lessen my existence. Oh, that is funny.
Like, you think, like, oh, we could be allies. It's like, no, that's not the purpose of doing what they're doing right now. Like, no one does that for the joy of it. Like, no one enjoys just being a random player. Like, oh, I want to play 45 characters, whatever the fuck it is now. It's like, no, like, nobody has the time unless you have a no job and you just, like, eating fucking, Tostitos pizza rolls all day. Like,
I mean, I think Momochi. It's been like a streamer thing for.
oh, if you're a streamer, you got it. You got a job. You got it. If you want to be, Momochi wants to do it. I mean, fuck it. Pro player, Capcom Cup winner.
God.
If I'm
freaking Momochi, man.
Momochi's great. Such a tier right now. Great. He's just killing it with Ryu. I love it.
We're on a slight tangent, but fuck it.
Not really. This is just a fighting game podcast today.
So not only did he go on a tear with Ryu in Capcom Cup, which is great, and did you see Top 8?
I think I did for that Capcom Cup event. Okay. They were playing it. I don't know if I was conscious for all of it because it's Street Fighter 5, but
yeah, that's fair.
But I did watch a decent amount of it.
Like, his match with Tokido came down to the fucking. He had the win, and he just dropped the combo right at the end, and Tokido got the punish and killed, and that reversed the situation. Like, so heartbreaking. Ugh.
Hey, but I mean, they're both great players.
In tangent to the 11 stuff, Topanga, the guys from Topanga recently had a stream where they were playing 11 and they couldn't stop streaming until they got 11 wins in a row with 11.
Oh my god!
And they get to it's been like 12 hours. And they get to 10 wins, and their next opponent is Momochi with 11 as well, and Momochi kicks their ass.
I mean, what did you expect? The Tekken guys aren't bad, but I mean, they're not throwing down with Momochi.
I mean, not for random select, no.
Nah,
Momochi's the master of chaos.
He is. He's funny as shit. I love that guy. Him and Mago.
Yeah,
Mago more so actually. Mago's funnier. He's such a clown.
The 2D god. Mago.
Oh, he's a mega clown, bro.
Oh my god. People were so the Cammy players were so happy he was winning, and they were so upset with the costume he was using because he was.
It's not his month, man. It's not his month. September Mago isn't here yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Give him 5 months, and then
and he'll fuck it up.
Then he'll win. If you hold Capcom Cup.
No, he won.
Yeah, it's true, he did. But I'm just saying, if you hold Capcom Cup in September, then yes, it's a wrap. But until then, my homie is literally in stasis.
If he's in stasis, he's starting off strong.
Yeah.
But oh my god, it was such a funny set of events with Capcom Cup. If you haven't gotten a chance to see Capcom Cup Japan 1, go ahead and watch it. It's actually probably some of the best Street Fighter 5 that's been out there in a while.
Yeah. No, that's some good stuff, and definitely looking forward to. There was a Tekken tournament recently, not to just kind of riff off that, but it was
it was with We Play.
Yeah, exactly. It was the We Play tournament. I think they held it in Pakistan. First live Tekken event that I've watched in probably a year and a half. So it was pretty cool to see, a lot of top players. Not a lot of guys wanted to go. I know that a lot of the top Korean players, Nii and a few others. Names are escaping my head, but a couple other guys. I think Saint I think went. But either way, Low-High, I'm pretty sure they declined to go, due to safety reasons, obviously. But I think everyone there was safe, and it was a fun tournament to watch. It's definitely good to see live Tekken again. JDCR went. Arslan Ash, obviously his hometown, so really can't not show up. So home country, I should say. I don't know where in Pakistan it was, but I can't imagine it was too far for him. But all in all, great tournament, and in general, it's been fun to see. But honestly, I've been, as far as fighting games are concerned, which is going to be the focus today, it seems like when we watch at the house, we've turned into old men. We have become
you've become
feared, what we were sworn to destroy.
You to a lesser degree, because you're more accepting of the newer games. I
am, but in general,
plural to a degree.
Yeah. No, we love to play them and we accept them. But I mean, from just a pure entertainment digestion standpoint, like on a daily basis, like if it's me, Jay, plural, a couple of other guys just chilling out, maybe Alex is there, maybe Rob is chilling with us actually. Rob will obviously allow me to watch Street Fighter 5 and things that he understands, but the rest of us will be watching on constant. It has to better have pixels or be Marvel. It better have pixels or be Marvel 3, like because we're watching.
Not even Revelator 2.
We actually no, we are watching it. If it's anime, we give the exception. Like we've been watching Under Night, we've been watching Rev, we've been watching X and Core. We watched a lot of Footsies the other day. Hello,
Footsies is fun.
Footsies is funny, yeah. But CBS 2, Marvel 2. We were watching Marvel 2 yesterday. Marvel 3 yesterday as well. So I take that pixel thing back a little bit, but you know, it's been like a lot of ye olden games. We haven't been watching as much of 7 or 5 or anything else that I can think of that's currently. There's not too much that's really being played at like we you know, it's another hard tangent, but fuck it. So we were watching Kizzy K. I'm sure you're familiar with the player.
I do.
Yes. The Panda Game, Panda Gaming, Kizzy K. Great streamer, great online personality, and he's you know, he plays a lot of stuff. He's just like Justin. You know, they're both on Panda Gaming. They play a lot of the trials, you know, for a lot of games. Make content out of that. Blah blah blah.
I feel like they are the professional FGC players for the non-competitive like interests.
They create good universal content that anyone can enjoy. Very personality strong, like very fun, well known for Justin and that. Kizzy a little less so, but in the anime scene he's pretty strong presence. And in general, so we watch Kizzy and I've already seen him do like 1,000 trials. I'm over it. So I'm like, let's watch some match footage the other day. And so we're putting on Rev 2. It's fun. It's a lot of cool segments. He's playing against Mike Ross. And so after that, we put on some Strive footage of him. And I'm just disgusted. I'm like revolted by the footage. I'm like, really? God, this is fucking slow. Like, this has got to be matching the pace of Grand Blue, if not slower.
Damn.
And I like watching it. Like, we'd played it for literally like that whole weekend that it was available for the beta, like 4 or 5 days or whatever the hell it was. And watching it like after just a month or two stepped away from it, I was like, this game sucks balls. Like dumpster juice. Like, it's just there's no way I see myself attaching myself to Guilty Gear Strive for a long period of time. It's just too slow. Like it's the pace, the damage, like all of it just seems so unappealing. Like in my hands, it's not so bad. Like any fighting game, honestly, most of them that I've played recently, like even Grand Blue, like once you're playing it, you're enjoying it. But like you understand in your brain the longevity. Like, I'm not gonna play Samurai Showdown, you know, like
Sam Show.
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
And that's some people's cup of tea, and I appreciate that. But like,
you might as well just play footsies.
It is an interesting dichotomy going on where like there's definitely the newer generation of the competitive scene that like either you were part of the older scene and you've accepted the newer, slower paced games and you've moved with it, or like you've more or less retired and like either found a new way to make content out of it or enjoy it or enjoy the old stuff.
But you see,
or just like retired to like Final Fantasy 14 or something.
Exactly. But that's it. But that's the thing. Like, I think there's a misconception possibly in what you said and what maybe people are thinking, that like the newer generation of fighting game players need to have this sort of completely dumbed down version of a fighting game. And it's like the pace doesn't explicitly handle the you know, the skill ceiling. It definitely addresses it in some capacity, but I don't think that that's just like the necessary trend. I think it will be for marketability, but when it comes to like all game developers across the board, I don't think that will be the primary design choice, or like a design choice trend that's moving forward. Like, you look at Under Night In-Birth, a relatively newish game, I want to say in the last 4-ish years or so. That game has got to be the fastest mainstream game right now, possibly. Like of the games that are being played at, like, you know, that have been released within the last 5 years, that are played at majors, that, you know, was a main Evo game. That game is fast and technical, and I think that and that game is beautiful. Like, it's really, really good game from a design standpoint. Not only character design, but like, you go into the trial mode, that game has probably the best training mode of any game, period. I think it teaches you the most practical, technical shit that you can possibly learn, like resets, real combos that you can use in game, like things that aren't just like overt, like things that are actually optimal. But beyond that, I think that, so conversely against the example of Strive that it's setting, like a very slower paced game, lighter, a little bit lighter on the combos, fatter damage, so that like these hits still matter, so that the game, the matches don't last like 3,000 years because you slowed down the game. From a movement and from a technical ceiling, it's like it just doesn't speak to me. Like when I experienced something almost the inverse of it, give me slightly less hit damage, less damage on hit, but more to do because it's a necessity to get damage, and just the overall movement of the game being a lot more exciting. Like when they figured out like wave dashing, so to speak, and like in Marvel 3, and like the hyper hopping or whatever the fuck they call it, like when they you see like back forward. Actually, that's the wave dashing, but whatever the forward version of that is, which I think still might be called wave dashing in Marvel 3. I don't know. I was never a big deep Marvel 3 terminology, but when the movement gets that faster, it changes the dynamic of the game. It changes what you can dodge, what you can maneuver around, and I feel like those are all interesting tactics that create for interesting gameplay. That I feel like you're just lessening by creating a slower game.
Do you think it comes down to the movement options in these
I think
games?
that's a huge thing that's being undervalued.
Okay.
And I also think that it's not even just the movement. Like, combos are intentionally short in that game,
Right.
in Strive in particular.
Yeah.
Like, not many go past 5 hits,
Right.
Even on, like, characters where traditionally you'd think that there'd be heavy combo characters, like, like Eddie or whatever. Like, it's just a pretty light game from a technical standpoint all around when it comes to what the player has to execute on. So I think that in and of itself, obviously you can say that it compensates to like a heavier mental game, like you have to commit more, or you have to kind of think more tactically, so to speak, possibly. But executing it is definitely shouldn't be the issue for you at this point, which might be what they consider to be the barrier for the general masses. So we'll see how that plays out, but I find it to be dejecting because I feel like it insults my intelligence and my capabilities as a player.
Right. I mean, you're not the first person to make those sentiments, and like it's always such an opinionated back and forth of like some people who don't think it should be that way, who think it should be more about the mental games and stuff like that. Although you'd think that they would just stick with the grappler or something like that kind of appeases to that.
I feel
to
like
that preference,
and then there's merit to be had in that. Some people feel like dexterity is an unfair, or not even unfair, but like an unappealing thing to tailor a game around. Like, you don't want it to be like, oh, I have to like Tekken claw to like do something, like, or do some obtrusive sequence of buttons. But like, there's also merit in that too, which I feel like people those people on the other side of the fence are disavowing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. I don't know if we'll see any game even come close to that in the future. Because I mean, like, Unist might have it, but that game's not even that young. That game is like,
oh yeah, it's definitely getting older at this point. Like,
I think it's closer to 6 or 7 years than it is 4 to 5.
I know, minorly younger than Street Fighter 5.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, maybe. I feel like I've just heard about it forever, but yeah, I guess what it is that like I see this division in the FGC in that regard, and it's so heartbreaking to see, because it's like what we saw for years with Smash Melee versus every new generation of Smash, where you just see this like stagnant but still thriving older half of a competitive games community, kind of continually fighting against the newer and ever expanding audience of the newer games, and you just kind of wish that that there could be a bridge between the two.
You've talked on this a lot. You and I, we've discussed this off mic before more than once, and I feel like this is sort of the quintessential dichotomy of players and sort of the problem that you see, that you've discussed with me more than once. This sort of bridging of the old school and the new school. And I think we probably mentioned it once or twice on podcasts, but of old school players and their particular the norms of fighting games in the culture and in the games themselves, and then the new school players and what they're expecting, especially when they see the esports landscape around them, and like the other sort of cultures and communities that have built around other types of games, like FPSs and MOBAs and whatever the fuck, sports games, etc. And so, with regards to that, I think we can segue possibly into the thought of, so right now we have the interesting development of Sony purchasing effectively Evo in its entirety. And so, there's the whole controversy around the games that'll be selected for Evo, Smash Brothers in particular, a Nintendo game. Probably most likely being left out depending on, how negotiations work out. And that affecting the representation of games. Now, on a very prominent community stage, if not the most prominent community stage. This is, for all intents and purposes, it's the World Championships of Fighting Games. And now it's owned and operated by a company with private interests, within the gaming community. Or within the gaming industry, I should say. It's like...
But it's always kind of been on that path for the last couple of years. For
certain. And so, without getting into the politics of all that, the reason I'm bringing it up is because as we see bigger interests like Sony getting involved at this level now, with the fighting game community, with tournaments and stuff like that, because obviously it's a huge marketing opportunity. Like, there's no way that they could ever pass this up. And it's a game how they cultivate their market. In general, we continually buy DLC, all these other fucking, aspects of their game. We are their customers. But how do you feel about the evolution? And instead of the dichotomy of old school, new school players, we can just kind of put another coat of paint on it and talk about the sort of the grassroots versus the esports rising sort of birth that's kind of happening right now, the change that's going to be going, the metamorphosis within the fighting game community that's going to be taking place. How do you feel? What do you feel like is being lost? Do you care? Like, is there any sort of perspective that you had? Because this is a conversation in this sort of frame that I've had more often than not with people in the fighting game community, old heads who've been in the sort of grassroots, being in Big E circle for a long time, seeing the elements of esports, big investors threatening the sort of spirit of the grassroots and the sort of structure. Meanwhile, there are people who are begging for fucking big money to get involved so that they can offer a different structure and more pay and more opportunity for players.
Yeah, I think, it's the singularity problem, where things get better. The esports route is one in which things get better in one way, but they get consistently better. Like, you need to fit the standards that whatever organization's going to be in charge of if you want to do well in esports. Because you're going to have to meet their standards. You're going to like stuff like infiltration. That's not going to fly. Like, I know some people still love that player, despite some of the stuff that's been going on in his personal life. But like,
he was acquitted mostly.
I understand, but I'm saying that stuff is not going to fly. Like, players like that are going to get thrown out immediately. And to an even lesser, to an even more significant extent, it's like you have these homegrown scenes that definitely try to highlight any player that shows up for them and that does well competitively. Meanwhile, the esports side of things, it tends to be more pre-selected, definitely in still the competitive realm, like definitely for players who are still very, very good at the game.
Are you talking about invitationals versus opens?
Yeah, exactly. Invitational versus opens, stuff like that. I think at the end of the day, I know think grassroots are always going to exist at the end of the day. And I think for those who are fearing the rise of esports because they're worried about how it will affect them. It's a genuine worry and it's genuine concern, but at the end of the day, it's gonna happen. Like, I don't think this is something you can ever slow down, and I don't think this is ever something you can deter people from being interested in.
Yeah, and in general, I think it's something that you, as a grassroots tournament organizer or person or community head, you work towards this every day. Like, you build your own elements of the scene in every day, in like, you know, in your efforts in the community, in the FGC. Those people in particular, you know, you may fear or even detest the idea of esports involvement, but you yourself are attempting to grow the interest in fighting games. Inherently, you are working towards the essential inevitable conclusion.
Right, but I think,
you know?
I think you're missing the detail. I think you're missing the details of what people get concerned about when.
Oh, I know what they're concerned about. I'm just saying that they should realize that their efforts, so to speak, still kind of meet the same end in a way.
But they're not worried about the end. They are worried about the end turning out in a way that they don't expect. They don't prefer it to be.
Yeah.
You know.
Let me say that I've, you know, for the people in our fighting game community here, well, in mine, you previously in Philadelphia,
Yeah.
You are still one of us, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, it's like, yeah, a lot of the FGC heads out here, and specifically, you know, Kyle and a couple of the other guys, you know, in Big E's circle. I won't throw out too many other names, but, you know, there have been genuine concerns about how they will treat the people who, you know, basically developed these communities. I know that they have specific, they rather be collaborative with them as opposed to be just uprooted by them. You know, like they would hope to have involvement with Sony and with Red Bull and with the other investors that come around to Philadelphia. And so far that has been the case. Like, they've been willing, they basically reach out to community heads, like specifically with Red Bull Conquest. Like, they're pretty collaborative with the people here in Philadelphia as far as like the already existing tournament scenes, going to places like, you know, where we have, damn it, where is the fudging, I'm having a hard, the esports center in North Libs. Yeah, I've been there not at all the last year, and all of a sudden I can't remember the goddamn name. Anyway, but every, you know, places like that, they've been pretty nice too, as far as like just like working with them as opposed to like just straight up, you know, building their own facility, so to speak. You know, because like they have the capacity to. This money has the ability to go ahead and basically host their own events completely, you know, independent of the tournament scene in any given place, but they'd rather right now work with the already existing structure, not only to save money and time, but, you know, just to basically, you know, show good faith, you know, go ahead and co-op with people who are already you know, developed personalities in that community, so you don't have to like build a little reputation from the ground up. I mean, you may be Red Bull, you may be Sony,
costly in that way.
Like, yeah, it is.
And I mean, that's what even Sony is doing to a degree. They're buying, they're literally buying a name to gain that recognition for that enterprise. Exactly. Because God knows Sony knows they can't just bank on the PlayStation system forever, but they still want to be in the games industry. So like, they're trying to find their next niche. They're trying to find their next outlet.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of outlets and money. I mean, Sony.
Yeah, sure, but the games center of Sony has been one of the most profitable.
For certain,
a long time, but they also know they also know that PlayStation 5, you know, it might not be a PlayStation 5, but PlayStation 7 might be the one that ends it all. You know, like that might be it.
They're lucky to have such an explosive interest in the PlayStation 5 out the gate. You know, because like with the 3, just take it a few years back, like when that came out, that was like a near bankrupting product. Like, you know, they were selling it at retail at $600 at launch. I remember buying it, and I remember even that $600 price value, they were still taking L's. On the production of with the technology at the time. Like, they didn't make a profit on that product until 4 years into its life cycle. Like, for a very long time, the PlayStation 3 was a very precarious product for Sony, because they were just, thank God they have like a movies and a music and a technology industry around themselves, but like that product in and of itself was a huge L for a very long time, until eventually it got popular, because, you know, Xbox in the West at the time, 360 was extremely popular, even in Europe. In America, it had an explosive popularity, until everyone realized that they were just microwave ovens. Like, and it's like, you know, if that red ring never pops off, you know, the PlayStation probably is more popular more quickly. But when people realize PlayStation Network was free and the library got bigger and yada yada yada, PlayStation 3.
I mean, even then, you just can't beat that initial push. Like,
oh, you can't. There's nothing bad about such a fantastic opening like the 5 is having. Like for them, I know that they're.
But it's fantastic. But it's also like I can see them. They have to see the horizon, and they have to see that they can't keep selling these types of things.
You can't keep riding the line like this for certain. Like, you definitely want to hedge your bets, and like it's a company that's as diversified as any. Like it's a Fortune 100 company. Like they'll figure a way to figure this out.
And to bring it back to like Evo, it's like, will this push actually make it so that? I mean, there's been a bunch of pieces written about how the FGC like just has not been. It's not a if you want to make money, you do not become a part of the FGC. That's just the way it's been for a while.
As far as the esports communities at large, of the available options to you, if you are a young gamer or even maybe a slightly older gamer looking to make money as a professional in this, a professional competitor, fighting games are not the optimal route. Like, that is just the truth of the scenario. It is a route, and if you find it fulfilling, even better for you in particular. But if you're just purely looking at the numbers for money, it's not it should not be your first option. You should be looking at definitely MOBA, definitely first person shooters with a much bigger audience.
Even what's it called, like Brawlhalla or something, which is like a Smash derivative.
Yeah,
that's doing bank in comparison to the staple FGC series.
Yeah, and there's a trade-off, of course. Like, those games have much larger audiences, much bigger competitive pools. So you're obviously going to be competing against more people. But if you're confident
I guess the point being is more so like, what weight do these fighting games even bring in terms of an audience, in terms of content, in terms of, like, if we're all content creators here and we're all tournament organizers and so on and so forth, and the ultimate goal at the end of the day is to not only provide this service but also do it in a way that allows people to continue with their lives, to have a livelihood. How do we get there? How do we develop fighting games into something that people can that these people who work so hard can live on? And maybe Sony has something in mind with this Evo project of theirs, that they can make something a bit more productive and efficient. Maybe WePlay, because I know WePlay is definitely getting involved with a lot of stuff, although a lot of people are uncertain about their commitment to specific US branches of the FGC.
I mean, there have been very fleeting investors in the fighting game community over the years that have had good showings in moments.
Yeah.
But then obviously kind of fluttered away. Like, Red Bull has been a rather long staple at this point.
Yeah. Well, they got Daigo. It's
like,
they got the gold mine early.
yeah. They found the golden calf, so to speak, or the golden goose. But
I mean, we even saw Liquid drop 2 of the most prominent Street Fighter V players, Nemo and John Takuchi, and like, they'd been sponsored forever. So, but they're out of the picture now. They're going full on MOBA, I assume.
Yeah, or something. But yeah, in general though, like, there have been a lot of like sort of one time, like for a short period of time there was the E-League. But to create long-term stability, like you're saying, like creating an ecosystem or some sort of stabilizing element of the fighting game community that creates public interest and creates the opportunity for people within the community to kind of go ahead and create content at a regular pace, to create stable income for everybody. There is the idea of, the league, an esports league that would be kind of comparative to what they have in MOBAs, in FPS communities. There's, in those communities, that's extremely normal. Like, historically, like, RTSs, MOBAs, and FPSs have had leagues for, like, at this point, the last 20 years or so. Like, MOBAs less so, but FPSs and RTSs have had leagues since the 90s in Europe and in Asia, as far as, like, circuits where players can play or people can commentate and create content out of. And I feel like for the fighting games, that's something that we've lacked. Like going around to majors is the best that we can offer, but like it's not adhering to a structure. The first thing that was offered in recent memory was, the Capcom Pro Tour, and then after that, other tours have sprung up. Tekken World Tour has sprung up. A couple of other tours have sprung up. The ESFL and the Japanese variant of that are also good steps in that direction. But there needs to be some sort of unifying league, I think, for certain games that have come out now. I think those will be some of the agents that kind of help create a better market for the fighting game community. And I feel like this Evo project could be in that vein.
Sure, at the highest level, I think. But I don't think it's going to be a trickle-down economic situation. I don't think it's going to be... I don't know how League is run. I don't know how MOBAs are run. I don't know how the FPS circuits are run. But
You're talking about for new players to get involved, like to get their opportunity? For that, at the lowest levels, for those things.
Is that equivalent to what we see currently with the fighting game community, where we see these like smaller tournaments and just people get picked up?
Yes and no. So I'll say for straight up League, as I remember it, again, I've been out of the community for a long period of time, but if you achieve a competitive, like straight up just grinding rank, like on the game, you eventually reach basically a rank called competitor, where you will be considered eligible for consideration for the league, and then those people get put into a tournament to see which ones are available, of the open slots, as opposed to like the teams that are literally bought in. Obviously there's a little bit of like pay to win or pay to compete sort of scenario, where most of the slots are kind of slotted by teams that already have seedings, so to speak, from like previous tournaments. But there is an opportunity at the highest level for like world tournaments and regional tournaments, and there's definitely smaller tournaments in general, which will probably be what the majors turn into if like the development of esports gaming kind of continues to kind of hold the most premier events, which I think is
kind of what I'm talking about. Because like right now there's only one big premier event for, at least for Street Fighter, and that's the Capcom Pro Tour Championship, which is like at the very end. And that kind of makes sense. It turns these smaller it turns these local, what used to be local majors into a circuit. So it was still mostly owned and run by grassroots efforts, but it had a connection to the larger end of the environment, of this competitive environment. And that kind of led to intermingling, and that kind of led to a lively kind of competitive scene. What I worry about is that once you get to that big esports level, it becomes more and more selective and not in terms of like there's fewer and fewer opportunities.
Yeah, I understand that, and that's a big concern of players. That people have mentioned before. Like, I can go to any major right now and have the opportunity to win, and if it's the right major, I can compete in the Capcom Pro Tour, because essentially the entire Capcom Pro Tour is an open in that sense, where like, as long as, well, right now for COVID, if I'm in the right time zone, like, then I can compete, so to speak. But if I'm not, as the only barrier is being there right now. But beyond that, if you're right, if this whole thing blows up, let's just say fighting games continue to accrue more interest and more interest and more interest, and we get to a place where it's so profitable that the companies will take the dive, because right now it is just more cost effective to go ahead and co-opt these tournament organizers and their tournaments by being a sponsor of the tournament, just putting money in for the pool and having it being basically a representative of the Capcom Pro Tour, so that if you win this, in its traditional format, not currently, but in its traditional format, if you win the major, you win a certain amount of Capcom Pro Tour points, and then you eventually get to call, and by winning it, you qualify for the Capcom Pro Tour, final. And so it's easier and more cost effective now just to be, basically a sponsor of those tournaments. To, just throw some money at the tournament organizer and throw some money at the pot for the specific games that you're sponsoring.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Street Fighter.
Because there's no advisors, there's no need to control the situation.
Yeah,
you can just,
but,
you are the You are the advertiser. If anything. Like
Exactly.
Capcom is the advertiser.
Yeah, but
And they're looking to sell their own product. But like
exactly. But if it gets to a point where there's so much money involved, like it reaches that apex where, like, let's just say there's like 3 times the amount of participants and the market's that much larger, that the company
I don't think it has anything to do with the participants. I think it has to do with I think it has much more to do with advertisers, because like once you get into a big, what causes something in this esports realm to get big are these advertisers, are financiers, are people
I'm not talking...
are bigger companies coming in with their own money, looking to sell their own product through popular competitors and players.
Yeah, and what I mean to refer by the amount of people is like the interest, not so much as like, logistically this is going to be a lot of people to deal with. Like, no, that's not the problem. The problem / good thing technically is going to be the amount of interest in the game, which you basically alluded to. So you're completely right. But we're both referring to the same thing. That once the interest in the game reaches that sort of critical mass, and then instead of Capcom being like, at this point, we will make more money hosting our own game, because even though we have to basically forfeiture, the startup costs to go ahead and find the infrastructure and basically set up a tournament, the money for running that tournament at this point with that kind of interest, not only from the ads but from the participants, is going to be so much more profitable than just signing up, just helping out this grassroots coordinator. And that's going to be a happy problem when it happens. Like, at that point, we're basically saying the market is so big in fighting games that the money interests that be are willing to go ahead and throw down some serious coin to invest into the actual investment. And so I think at that point, grassroots organizers will have made and will still have the opportunity to make money in that market. They will just have to now compete against those big money investors. But that's the thing, I don't see that happening soon. And if we reach there, you will have definitely a fighting chance, per se. Like, you think, I'm not going to have like Sony's money to compete against, if they ever reach that point where it's like they're setting up their own tournament. I just don't see it happening within a reasonable time span. Like, not even in the next 10 years do I see it getting to that critical mass.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, I don't know. It's really is too soon to tell. I think
that fighting games are sort of stuck in a place, and it's not even by design, but it is by what we have become. Like, it is not just it's
what
it's
have
the culture
we become?
around
like
the game.
For the summary, what is it that we are? What is this?
What is the defining? This is a great question, and I love this question because it's something that we talk about this all the time in different ways. Mm-hmm. But like, quintessentially, what differentiates the fighting game community from every other sect of competitive gaming? Mm-hmm. And like, you think about it, and it's mostly like the ruffian nature of, and that's a very kind way of putting it.
No, that's fair.
But it is a defining element of the community. Like, it's definitely embedded into the DNA, so to speak. And what I mean by that sort of ruffian nature, it's like there's sort of all of the games it's a very intimate experience. Like, you think about most other games, and yes, RTS, real-time strategies like StarCraft and Age of Empires, and they're 1v1 too, and those games are fantastic. And but there's a sort of professionalism and etiquette to those games. Same thing with MOBA and FPS. Those are team games. Mm-hmm. It's a very sort of one, just by design, all fighting games, almost all of them. I can't think of a single one that isn't right now that's played at the competitive level. It is 1v1, so it's a very intimate process of sort of, it's just like watching, in the sense, any sort of traditional fighting match that you would see martial arts in real life, where you would see like this sort of dichotomy of warrior versus warrior, competitor versus competitor. And then it breeds that sort of a community around it, like, where I should say, like, it's a gladiatorial feel. Like, there's definitely like a sort of intimate spectator experience, and how that kind of belays to the community's DNA and how it differentiates us from other communities. I feel like we are a very emotional and how should I say, urban spirited community. Like, not to say that there aren't cornfields with fucking people playing Street Fighter, but like, it feels like in the West, it feels very city centric, very urban savvy. and very like cut your teeth, sort of like don't care what you think sort of kind of community. Like you have to sort of like earn respect, and there's I don't know what it is about that just doesn't seem like there's a more streamlined sort of clean cut professional outlook on other games. This is just from a mental image. This isn't exactly like something specific as far as the practices of the FGC are concerned.
I would say that level of devil may care attitude,
it's lessening.
It exists in a lot of other fields. Like there's definitely a lot of other players that like have an attitude like that kind of have that attitude in other fields that I've seen. If Jay was here, but you're at least on point with saying that I should say at least agree on the point that it's largely like a band of thieves, if you would, because it's like,
look, we put in this in very poetic and nice terms, but like this the end all be alls, we pretty ratchet. Like at the end of the day, like FGC is pretty rough and tumble, like hood. And like that's how it is.
Well, I think that's also part of your own perspective, though, because you're in the Philadelphia area.
That's true, but like inherently across the board. And again, Philly East Coast FGC is very hood. Like New Jersey, New York, like Philly FGC is pretty rough and tumble. But like you go to like Chicago, same situation. West Coast a little less so, but that's just West Coast people. Like in general, they're more laid back. It's just, I'm stereotyping for an entire coast, but in general, that's just a perception. And honestly, in my life's experience from like homies I have from the West Coast are generally really fucking chill. Like, and I envy elements of that as well, because like stereotypically people on the East Coast, we just really high-strung, high-energy people. Like, and there's a place for that, obviously, in the competitive scene. But yeah, as I've perceived it, you're correct. I am speaking with bias, like the FGC that I've lived in for my entire life has been kind of hood, and that's okay.
But how do you market that to a broader level?
So you gotta understand how you market hood shit.
No, but I mean, like, it's not that it's not doable. I'm just wondering.
Oh yeah,
like it's
see,
not.
You heard
that's not how Overwatch plays itself.
Let me tell you. Have you heard of this thing called the NBA?
True.
You can take the hood out the ball, but you can't entirely take the ball out the hood, so to speak. And what I mean to say is that at the end of the day, yeah, I can dress it up in a professional element. I can basically put it into a structure that benefits the players to the highest degree. Obviously the opportunities are going to be low, because just like that, like you look at this, the amount of scholarships that are given out to professional athletes at the collegiate level for like football across the entire country, something I researched at one point, around like 1,700 total, like every university. And it's like, how many high school players do you think there are that play football in American football? Like millions. And 1,700, like it's an astronomical amount just to get into college, and then after that, the opportunities to play in the NFL. Like it's tight. It is tight, and that's how it is when the market gets that big. That's how it's been in like FPS and mobile. Like, do you know how big those fucking player bases are? Fucking million people play League of Legends. You know how many people get to play in like the fucking in World Tournament, or like even in like North American regionals? Like, not that many. Like 70 people. Like,
but in that comparison, we're comparing fighting games to like the martial arts, boxing, and even UFC scene. Does that kind of mean that, like, because even in comparison to the NFL and the NBA and even baseball, like UFC is not that popular.
UFC's
in comparison to NBA.
In comparison to the NBA, of course, the net worth of that league versus that league, and that's just a blanket statement for its overall worth to people in general. Like, obviously we're talking about monetary value, but like it's overall.
Right, but if we're making if we're making the comparisons, right?
No, it's
so
not
in
comparable.
That case, is this kind of where fighting games will exist then forever?
Not forever, because the UFC in general, I think, is growing. Like for that comparison, just to take it to its end, like the UFC is growing every year as far as its popularity is concerned, and like right now, like
I think it's growing, and I don't have the statistics to back this up, but I think it's growing to replace boxing.
It is definitely in a place where it's definitely
it's eating another, you know.
For
like
a while it was.
The comparison is not like I don't think the comparison because comparing it to fighting games, it's like saying, oh well, Tekken's getting so much better. It's like, yeah, it's because Street Fighter is doing worse. It's like, you know, like one audience is being turned into another. It's not expanding. It's just cannibalizing,
so to speak. Some people say that. I know what you're saying. Like the market isn't increasing, just the balance of power is changing.
Yeah.
Like yeah. And with the UFC, I don't think it's purely cannibalizing boxing, so to speak. I definitely think it's chunked out a huge part of boxing's market. But I think that it's still growing. There's another competitive circuit, the One, which is like the premier Asian UFC circuit, which is definitely huge. Boxing itself has not died yet. It's resurgent. Obviously, most like biggest headlines still kind of, you know, revolve around like Deontay Wilder and like Fury, like those fights and stuff like that. Only like the premierest fights have like world recognition, but like, and but the UFC definitely carries, I think, more clout, so to speak. But as far as like markets growing, like look at the NBA itself as an example, perhaps. That market is the most, it's globalizing faster than any other sport. Like you look at, obviously, you know, you can't touch actual football, like real soccer. That's just, you know, a juggernaut that'll always be the juggernaut, like in the room. But as far as the other sports that have the opportunity to globalize, you know, like baseball or golf or tennis, like the NBA is moving as far as its global popularity and the development of basketball in other countries in Africa now, in Asia. Like it is just massive. And so I feel like there is opportunity for fighting games to do that, to do something like that, to grow beyond its borders, to grow as an entire community, and not just to change the power balance within. And so to actually take up chunks of the overall gaming industry's interest in a competitive sense, for certain. And I think it will do that, just at a very slow pace comparatively to the other games, because those games I feel like are just more universally appealing for a lot of different reasons, as opposed to fighting games. Fighting games, taking away the stigma around the community for a second, just purely looking at the game from like a gameplay standpoint. If I'm just a guy on the street, you know, or like a kid, you know, 16-year-old, and I want to play video games, and like I'm still kind of forming my opinions about life and shit, I guess, or whatever the fuck I'm doing at 16, and I'm like, let me buy a fucking video game, and I want to compete, and I'm competitive in that sense, and I want to like test my skill at a video game. Am I gonna pick up, you know, Call of Duty Warzone, where all my fucking friends are playing, and I see all these streamers every day, you know? Am I gonna pick up, you know, and you know that it has sort of a, you know, one-to-one sort of, there's a few ways you have the options in that game. Like I could take the skill upon myself, or I could be in a team base. In Street Fighter, in fighting games, you know, Under Night, doesn't matter what game it is, you're kind of locked into this scenario where the game doesn't have a whole lot of it might not appear to have a lot of depth, and like, you know, you're stuck on a 2D plane, sometimes a 3D plane, but generally a boxed in arena. You there, the other guy's there, that's it. It may seem limited. I feel like some people look at like, you know, a MOBA, and like, even though you're playing in the same arena over and over again, you have like a gajillion characters to play with, and all these team dynamics, and like, you know, the gameplay is already upfront a little bit more in depth possibly than a fighting game, or at least the overall dynamic and structure is vastly different. So there's a lot to ingest here. I think the depth of a fighting game isn't immediately apparent to a person when they touch it, you know? That's, I think, where you derive a lot of the joy and longevity of play. Like, you can't just pick up a fighting game and like play the same type of shit and enjoy it usually. Like, I can't just go sweep, you know, like playing like low level to moderate level FGC skill and have fun. For me, like, I need to mine the game for content and the community for content, because the game itself can be a pretty flat experience. So I think that's probably to its detriment as far as growing it, but you have to kind of grow you have to grow the marketing, sort of market the deeper elements of the game. Like, you can take it this far, you know, there are these amount of opportunities to compete against people. Like, the reason why you buy this game is because it is an experience beyond like the initial just mechanical you know, playing of the game.
No, I agree to that extent. Like, God, we can go on for like another hour on like what the appeal of fighting games is compared to what people tend to experience, compared to what what the genuine long-term appeal is, and how the clash of those two tends to disillusion people, create really toxic self environments for them, and how people need to be directed out of that sense.
Yep.
Like, holy shit, people get so angry at these games, and they get angry at League too, and they get angry at
there rages everywhere, but
there rages everywhere, but it's so rare. Every time I see somebody rage in Dota, it's always at other people, and then they'll mention how they were maybe underperforming in some way or something like that.
You rage in those games, but Dota, it's it's a team-based scenario already, so
I have not seen the extent of self-loathing in those games as I have in fighting games. People get so depressed playing these games, learning or beginning with these games at times.
Yeah, it can be a challenge.
Themselves.
It's a very unique environment. I mean, in anything in life, when you're learning it, it's challenging for certain, especially as you get older, or just capacity to do learning. Unless you're an exceptionally gifted or unique, genetically human being, learning gets harder as we get older. And I'm not saying, but that whole element of it aside, learning as a process in general for young or old is a very challenging thing. And for games, a lot of people just want to pick up a game and inherently understand it and just have fun with it immediately. But as a competitor, if you are a competitive person, or at least strive to be a competitive person, for whatever reason, it's just a part of those people. I feel like they would have struggles in any capacity. It takes time if you're a competitive person to reach the skill level that people have taken a game to, the main line, the meta of a game. There's a reason why people get paid to do this, because they have put in the time. And so I understand that for the layman, the people who get frustrated, this is just sort of I don't know exactly what type of tangent this is kind of sort of for the people who get ragey, because in the FGC, I'll agree with you what you said. There are hard body ragers, and it definitely has a unique effect on the person as opposed to other esports, because it's so personal. There's just this huge amount of accountability to yourself. You cannot blame the scenario, and you can only blame the opponent too. Yeah, you can
there
blame
are
the scenario.
Those people that blame the scenario, but that's
three things
that's
you can
more
do.
Universal. But
you can blame the scenario, you can blame the other person, or you can blame yourself. And oftentimes, eventually, you eventually consolidate to the third. Eventually, you take accountability for letting that situation happen and not being able to deal with what your opponent did, and you just have to put it on yourself. And that's hard for some people, because I feel like that might be the thing that we've been searching to say. Fighting games make you really accountable for your actions. Excuse me, as a competitor. You good?
Yeah. No, I thought you were trying to say something.
Nah. Well, we've reached a healthy 1 hour and 20-some minute mark.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we could probably wrap it up for today at the very least. But it was an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it was all right. Not our best, not our worst. Actually, far.
Well, we'll leave it up for the people to decide. So if you guys are still with us at this length in time, thank you so much for watching. You can find us on all the traditional Twitters and the Instagrams and stuff that'll be linked in the doobly-doo below. Go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe as always. And if you guys enjoyed it, thank you so much. Have a good day, have a good life, and we'll see you on the next one.